Hi, this is Kaery with Kaery Concealed in the Active Self-Protection Extra channel. And today, this is going to be part 5 of our Good Friend's Guide to a Great Range Experience. And we're going to be talking about some tips and strategies and ideas for running a safe, efficient, and effective range session. So strategies for running a safe, efficient, and effective range session, whether that's you're running an entire line of shooters or you're just at the range by yourself. So come on back and we'll talk about it.
The Black Arch Protoss holster is the only hybrid-like holster that I can recommend. It does everything that a holster needs to do and is great for strong side carry. They're part of our holster consortium. Go check them out at the link in the description.
Welcome back. So I have felt a huge burden to use my students' time well, and even to use my friends' time well. When they call and say, hey, would you, before I was teaching, people would call and say, well, hey, would you go to the range with me, blah, blah, blah. And I have always felt a burden to use their time well. I don't know 100% where that comes from, but I know that I can give my students their money back if they're not happy with the class that they take from me, but I can't give them their time back. And maybe it comes from because 15 years ago when I first started training, I had to travel in order to train. I couldn't find any training in my local area. And so I was either most of the time flying, sometimes driving. And it was a lot for us as a family. It was a big sacrifice. I'm thankful that my family was willing to help me go. At that time, my husband, bless his heart, was, and he's amazing with the kids, always has been. But he was at home alone with the kids, the ages then, they were 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 10, and 12. And yes, they were all helpful, but it's just a lot of people to manage. And then the fees the class fees, and not to mention the ammunition fees and traveling expenses and lodging and those sorts of things. It was expensive, and it was a big sacrifice for us as a family, a worth it sacrifice. And I'm not complaining at all, but it was a sacrifice. And I remember oftentimes it was 90% of the time, it was worth the investment and it was worth the time to go. Every once in a while, and they seem to be the ones that would stick out to me here and there, but every once in a while, I would attend a class that was a little bit of a disappointing experience. Sometimes it was disappointing because I had invited someone to go with me, and the instructor is not someone I had trained with before, and I didn't realize that they were a yeller or something like that. The person I had invited wasn't keen on being yelled at. And you might think that you don't get yelled at if you do everything right, but that isn't the case. Those of you that have been in the military know what that's about. So you can be doing everything right, and sometimes you're still yelled at to motivate you and things like that. But I realize that people don't learn very well when their body and brain are bathed with cortisol. So if you're in a cortisol waterfall, it's tough to learn well, and retention and transfer isn't as great as it could be. So sometimes, and it would be the opposite of the commanding, rah, rah, rah. It would be an instructor that really didn't seem like they were very in charge of what was going on at the range. And it was more of a visit session, like pay money and come and hang out for the privilege of hanging out with that instructor. And they would, share a tip or that sort of thing, a few of them. But there were the classes then that I would go to where it was, this happened to me last weekend. Last week, I got to take, even wearing this thing and driving this scooter, I got to take Chuck Pressburg's no-fail pistol. And in the first 10 minutes of class, I kid you not, in the first 10 minutes of class, he explained something that was worth the entire amount class fee that I paid. And that's no joke. And so that happens too sometimes. Sometimes classes that I attend have a bit of a disorganized feel. They may not be disorganized, but the feel is that. And then sometimes it seems like there's less opportunity for solid retention and transfer than on an efficiently run range. So this is not going to be an exhaustive list or way to make a range session efficient, but these are just some things that we've learned over the years and some things that have helped us kind of maximize our efficiency on the range with our learners to make it safe, efficient, and effective. So in parts 3 and 4 of this series, we talked about the science of learning, and last time we talked about random instructor hacks. And in a nutshell, me lecturing and me pouring all of my knowledge into my students' bucket is suboptimal. For retention and transfer, the maximum retention and transfer of learning, my learners need to engage in active learning. And that active learning we talked about last time facilitates desirable difficulties. And what are desirable difficulties? Well, in part 4, we talked about difficulties in the learning process. Difficulties are part of the learning process, and it's those difficulties that helps learning stick. And so as a trainer, my job is to help build a cognitive framework. But I want that framework to be based on experience. I don't want it to be something they just have to imagine or realize. I want them to have experience to build that cognitive framework so that they can put the new learning into that framework. So I'm using this box as an example of the cognitive framework that I'm helping my learners build to begin with. And when we use only words and think we're building a cognitive framework, as Marcus Wynn said in his Random Instructor Hacks post, which was in the description of the part 4 of this series, he explains that if an instructor was asked to teach devout Muslims or Orthodox Jews about the joy of eating a Virginia ham, that would be teaching a topic to an audience that has no experience whatsoever with eating a Virginia ham. And if we're only able to use words, it's difficult and challenging to adequately describe that. Now, if we can first build a cognitive framework for the learner to hang their learning on, then using words can enhance that experience. Now, I don't have an example for you of using of building a cognitive framework with experience for a Virginia ham, but I just thought that was a great example of something that's kind of, it's a little bit nebulous, but how do we explain the joys of eating a Virginia ham to somebody that's never experienced ham before? And if we tell them, now go do what I just told you about, go experience the joy of a Virginia ham, that's going to be tough for them to do unless I've found a way to build a cognitive framework. So I, at one point, had to face that perhaps the way I had seen firearm instruction done for my whole life, the way I'd even seen my dad teach and the way I'd seen people that taught him teach, and not that I got to see that a lot, but I did here and there, or the coaches that we had when we would shoot on the BFW rifle team, I had to kind of come to grips with maybe what I had seen and experienced wasn't necessarily what I wanted to continue doing as an instructor. Maybe I wanted to tweak things a little and improve things a little and reshape my beliefs about what was possible. Because as I was thinking about how long firearm training has been going on, I don't know the exact year, but at the National Fire Museum, by the way, in Cody, Wyoming, they have a great museum there, as you can imagine, National Fire Museum. It's a great museum. And they have great videos that show you some hand cannons back from like 800 AD. It's just great stuff there that you can see. But anyway, I don't know how long firearm training has been going on in America, but let's just say the late 1700s. I wonder how much has changed about how firearm training is done. And so I want to make sure that I offer training that makes my learners capable of protecting themselves and those they love. And really, really importantly, it makes them want to come back for further training. It's super important to me that my learners want to come back. So I feel that when students come to my range, it's my responsibility to keep them safe from what they often don't even know is dangerous. Kind of like the child. Well, we live on a lake, and my daughter and her husband and our grandbaby are going to be coming here in a couple weeks. And our grandbaby doesn't know about what it's like to live on the lake, and she doesn't know about the danger. She's under a year old. She doesn't know about the dangers of the grass that goes right up to the edge of the water and how it's 5 feet deep as soon as you step off the grass. So we have to protect her from what she doesn't even know is dangerous. Well, I feel like it's that way when students come to my classes, especially my live fire classes. So some things that I like to think about when they arrive is, what can I tell them as they're arriving that helps set them up for success? So some of the things that we talk about with them is it's natural for them to want to get their stuff out and get ready to go for class when they arrive for class. So we'll often say wherever you're, as students walk into the class, whether we're teaching at a conference or whether we're teaching a class for the whole weekend, same group of people for the whole weekend, wherever your gun is, leave it there and we will gun up together. So just leave your gun where it is, no skin on touching your gun for now until we gun up together. We'll encourage them to fill their magazines to their heart's content. We'll encourage them to use the restroom then before we holster up and gun up. We'll encourage them to find a spot where they can sit in the shade, and we'll encourage them to be easy on their knees and to drink a lot. And whatever we can do to set them up for success. We ask them if you have any questions, let us know. And that's while people are coming into class and kind of assembling and getting ready. And people like knowing, okay, I can fill my magazines. Awesome. And they'll often ask, how should I fill them all the way? Should I leave one empty? And so we'll give them that information as well. Another way that we like to set our students up for success is by giving them the expected behavior. To me, it seemed like when I first started taking classes that there were like some manners and customs of being on the range. And they might even be a little bit different depending on whatever range you go to. So what can I tell my learners about the manners and customs of the range? What if it's their very first live fire class that they've ever been to? I don't know if it's their first class or not, unless I've done a pre-course survey, and then I might know. Either way, I don't want to assume that they do know. To me, that would be unfair to my learners to assume that they know exactly what's expected of them on that range. So so we talk about things like, during the class, we explain that, we don't want to bend over and scoop up our gear while people have their guns out. So wait. It's okay to let your magazines fall on the ground. Magazines are a wear item, and it's okay to let them fall on the ground. And we will all together, once the line is clear and all the handguns have been put in their holsters, we will say the line is gear and scoop your gear and retreat to the rear or something like that. And let them know when they'll be able to pick up their stuff that's landed on the ground. We like to talk about no emotional reholstering. We like to demonstrate that. What does that mean? Like if you had a great shot, slamming the holster in, or being frustrated. And people giggle and laugh a little bit when we do that, but it shows them what we want them to avoid. And then we also show them what we mean by safely, carefully, reluctantly holstering their firearm. We talk about keeping the line dressed. And all of these things we talk about, we explain the why. We lead with the why. Adults and children are far more compliant when they understand the why. Why are we asking them to do these things or not do these things? So we like to tell them the behaviors we expect, or not we expect these behaviors, but what's expected on the range, or what our hopes are, or what they can do to have the most successful experience. We talk about no unauthorized gun handling. Mr. Neal, I think, says it beautifully when he says there's no unauthorized gun handling. No gun handling behind the line. We explain what that means, and he very carefully describes unauthorized gun handling. And he explains that there are two things that will cause us to have an uncomfortable conversation, and that is any unauthorized gun handling behind the line, and if you point the gun at someone else. And it doesn't take long to do that at all, but we show students what we mean by unauthorized gun handling, and we explain why we don't want unauthorized gun handling. We talk about how to do administrative reloads if the class is, if it'd be best for the learners to know how to do that, or if that question will come up. We talk about that at some point. Hey, here's how to do an administrative reload with the gun in your holster. And if you can access your magazine release, and we'll show them on one of our holsters, or they might ask us and we'll show them on theirs. Here's how you do it. And we encourage them. These are the situations under which you might do it if you don't have that many magazines and you want to pop that magazine out and fill it up while you're back at the bench filling your others. And then when you go to put it in, make sure you push it all the way in and pull back a little bit to make sure it's fully seated. And we explain why that is important to do. So I think one of the biggest learning tools we have as an instructor is, and I think Dr. Lewinsky says it best, I've quoted him a lot in this series, but he says, giving people the courage to be imperfect in the learning process is one of the best learning tools we have, because making mistakes is the best way to learn. So we want our students to feel the freedom to be imperfect, but we also want to set them up for success, especially in areas of safety. So I don't want my students to be imperfect in their safe handling, and I don't want them to be imperfect in and handle their gun behind the line when they shouldn't, those sorts of things. So that's why we set them up for success by giving them this information and explaining the whys before we even start. So I think one of the things as an instructor is that we have to understand, I have to understand that I need to be in command and take charge, and I need to be decisive and communicate to my learners clearly what it is I want them to do. Sometimes we talk about what we don't want somebody to do, but I prefer, if at all possible, to explain, here's what I want you to do, and here's why. Or here's a best practice, and here's why it's a best practice. We've all seen the videos where a police officer pulls somebody over and asks them if they have a gun in their car or a gun on them. And the individual will say, yeah, I have a gun. And the officer will say, all right, don't touch the, you know what, and the individual will reach for the gun. Not because they're trying to hurt the officer. I'm sure there are instances when they are trying to, but in the ones I'm talking about, they're not trying to hurt the officer. But they hear reach for the gun. And I want to make sure that I communicate clearly what it is I want my learners to do so they can have maximum success. So what if you are going to be leading a class or leading a group on the range and you don't have a way to practice being able to give good range commands or be clear on the range? Well, you can just mentally rehearse it, or you can even rehearse it at home. How would you say the different things that you want to communicate? So here's just a list of a couple of things that I mentioned, some of the things we already talked about, but here are some more things that we might mention. I like to talk about keeping the line dressed, and I explain to them how to know the line is dressed. Being on the line means you have a toe on the line. I like to paint a line on the ground. Sometimes ranges I go to, they don't like you to use ground paint, even though it washes away in the rain. So I ask if I can use mustard or mayonnaise, and that works well. The rain smells like pickles all day. But I like my students to know right where I want them to be. Then nobody's trying to shuffle forward and shuffle backward. And to me, it just feels more organized and safer. So we talk about what does it mean to keep the line dressed? And I just, because some people just don't know that. They don't understand. And you have people scoot up, scoot back, scoot up, scoot back. And that takes time. And so I'll say, hey, if you can turn your head to the left or right and see more than just the ear of the person next to you, meaning you can see all the other people down there on the other side of the person next to you, the line isn't dressed. And so you want to adjust yourself little by little, backward and forward, until you're just able to see the ear of the person next to you. We talk about if the gun starts to fall out of their hands, to just let it go. We sing the song, let it go, and have fun with that. We talk about that once the gun goes in the holster, it stays in the holster, and that's the great place for it. Don't take it out of the holster until you're on the line and you're given the command to, release to your task. You can shoot the drill, or you hear the timer, or we say go, or go ahead, whatever. We also like to tell them that we're running a hot range, and that they can refill their magazines and they can reload their guns after each drill if that class is if that's a class that facilitates that. One of the other things I like to talk to my learners about is to be prepared for the burn, bee as in a buzzing bee. So I want my students, if it's an outdoor range, and actually I had a class last year where at an indoor range, we have somebody that was stung by a bee at an indoor range. But I like to remind them that, hey, while we're standing out here shooting on the range, you might get stung or bit by a mosquito, or you might have some hot brass. I got some hot brass caught it last week at No Fail Pistol. We were doing some one-handed shooting, and I had my this hand here clutching, shooting one-handed, and I got a little bit of hot brass there. But if we tell our learners, especially those that have never been to a shooting range before, or they've only ever shot in stalls, they don't know that hot brass can come at them, and they don't know what it can do to them. They don't know that it's, they might think, oh my gosh, this could, I could die or something. You might think that sounds crazy, but if people don't know and we haven't told them what to expect, they don't know. So I don't want people hopping around with a gun. So I tell them it's okay if your neighbor's hot brass hits you. If you can, just brush it off, or just keep your muzzle pointed in the direction of least consequence. We talk about where that is. We encourage them to holster the gun if they need to pull out their sweatshirt. And sometimes in classes, I even show, in my beginner classes, and when I teach the range safety officer material, I show videos of people at ranges that end up with hot brass down the back of their sweatshirt, and what happens when they're grabbing at it and grasping at it and they have a gun in their hand. So I just like people to mentally prepare themselves for being stung or receiving hot brass, and that seems to work a little bit better. So anyway, I hope this has been interesting or helpful to you. Just some tips and tricks on running a safe, efficient, and effective range session, whether that's for you or for other people. So thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.